All right, we back. Week 1. I was gonna say in the books. I guess we're not technically in the books. We got pretty massive matchup of the Jets and the Bills for tonight, so we still got to see about that one, which will truly confirm or disconfirm all of our off-season NFL takes. I put out a little bit of a joke tweet or Zeet. Is that is that what we're calling him now? Elon, help me out here, buddy. Um, about the fact that for my off-season takes, 60% of the time I'm right every time. A takeoff on the Sex Panther from the glorious Anchorman movie. But that's kind of what we're aiming for here, right? That's what makes it so difficult when we have the back padding of everyone who's done well on any sort of prediction. We have all the confirmation bias. We have everything else here that it's really, really difficult to sort out just looking at results anecdotally, who's making good predictions and who's making bad predictions. And saying, hey, I got these 2 predictions right last year, so trust me on my next 50 predictions. Well, we're talking about a pretty limited sample in a lot of these things here. So what we're trying to do here is, if we can be right with 60% of our takes, that's not bad. Not bad at all. And so far this week, we got some good, we got some bad from what was going on in the offseason. We had the glorious implosion of, well, I should say glorious. I don't want to root for anyone's demise, but Kadarius Toney going down in flames kind of helped some of my takes over the years there. But then there's some other ones, like maybe Jordan Love balling out that didn't really help my assumption that we could probably expect him to not be that good, just because of the baseline of what we expect from late first round quarterbacks. But maybe he is. Wasn't the toughest matchup, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that even more. Now, if you want to get even more details about everything I'm talking about here, wouldn't be doing my job if I'm not shilling. So I got to be shilling the Substack here. Unexpected Points. Substack.com. Please go on there. I got my advanced reviews, which are now broken up by the early window and then the late window and Sunday Night Football. I think it'll make it a little bit easier for me than to have to write up and paste in all of the different plots and tables for every game. So I guess we're talking about 14 games that went on yesterday, rather than having to do all that, break that up a little bit. And plus the data that's going on over with our friends at NFL Scraper, NFL Reader. There's some issues there, but I've been correcting them as I'm going through, and those will be continued to be corrected systematically as we get on with the rest of the season. But anyway, go on the Substack, sign up, get all that goodness for you. And also, I'll just say here that if you can't afford it, you're a student, you have financial difficulties, whatever, I don't need an excuse. I don't need a reason why. Just go ahead. Shoot me a note. If you're already on the free mailing list there, just go ahead and reply to something. Shoot me a note, ask to be added for a comp subscription. I'll toss you on there for 6 months, which I think will pretty much take you through the NFL season if you want. Just go ahead and do that. Or DM me. I think I'm still getting, I think I still have my DMs open, even though I was getting a bunch of trash. A bunch of real hot chicks were into me. Totally real hot chicks were into my NFL analytics announcements on Twitter, and were sending me DMs. So I think I still have those open. So you can also send me something there. But the easiest way, though, is if you're signed up for the free newsletter on Unexpected Points, if you just reply to the emails that you get when you get the newsletter, right back to me, say, hey, hook me up on this email address that I'm sending for a free 6-month comp to sub, and I will do that. And then if 6 months from now you still having some problems, you want to get that off-season content, I'll roll it forward for another 6 months. No problem. I just appreciate everyone supporting it if you can, and then if you can't and you just want to get the content, I'll take that too. All right, let's get into the week. I'm not sure I'm going to go by on a week-by-week basis here. If you want to get the adjusted scores, all the details, it's on the Google subscriber sheet here for paid subscribers. It's part of all the posts here. But I want to start when we're talking about this week by saying you were not Your perception's not off if you thought that offense stunk, and especially in that early window. Man, things were rough in that early window. Maybe you're noticing on your fantasy football teams that things are pretty rough. They got a little bit better in the late games, the 5 late games we had as far as offense is concerned. Not so great in the Sunday night football game for the Giants there. But I went ahead and calculated out the offensive EPA per play numbers and then the success rate numbers. And for me, success rate is just your successful play if your EPA on that play was greater than 0, and then unsuccessful if it's less than 0. So I went ahead and calculated all those out for every week of the regular season in the NFL since 2001. So this week here, for offensive EPA, we're talking about a first percentile type of outcome for any week in the season. And remember, this is like good weather. This is week 1. This is not, late December where you think some things may be a little bit worse. So it was right near the bottom. If you take any week that we've had so far, again, of 377 weeks that I have here, going back to 2001, this is the 6th worst offensive EPA per play at negative 0.09. The worst, for anyone who's interested, is 2006, week 5, a little bit over 0.1, negative 0.1 EPA per play in that week. So we're only talking about 5 other weeks since 2001 that have been worse so far. I mean, maybe the Bills and the Jets will just, destroy things going forward. But we'll see. And all these weeks that I'm talking about were 2010 and earlier. So, of course, offense has been getting more efficient over time. So this is all 2010 and earlier. So nothing since 2010 has been as bad any week of any NFL week, any season offensively as we saw this week. If we look from a success rate standpoint, it's a little bit better. And that makes sense because where are we at here from success rate? If we take the worst success rates ever, we are at number 17. So about 8th percentile. And, offenses generally in the NFL are doing shorter plays, shorter passes just over time. So success rates that kind of get elevated over time. And especially it's happening now with these cover 2 defenses, everything else. We thought maybe they had them figured out, or at least guys like Mahomes and others and Joe Burrow had these cover 2 defenses figured out in the second half of last season. But nope, did not happen. The DCs have been in the lab. DCs have been in the lab figuring out how to shut down these offenses, and it worked extremely well so far. And as far as pass or run, it's about the same. I mean, the pass EPA, if you look at them over all these different weeks, it's a little bit better as far as that's concerned, actually, for the pass EPA. It's in the bottom 10th percentile for this year. And then the run is about the 5th percentile, but you combine those together and you go even lower over time. So that's kind of the overarching thing here. Offenses are losing. I'll let the film bros get in there and figure out exactly why that is happening. If you guys have any comments, I should probably just mention this now. If you have any comments you're watching the live stream, go ahead, shoot me a Q&A or anything else you want there that I can answer. If you have any theories on what's going on with NFL offenses, hey, let me know what you think about that one too. All right, let's get into the games. As I mentioned, we got the early window. I'm gonna plop through here. Let you know specifically, I'm going to focus on some games that have a high differential between what the adjusted score is telling us and what the actual score is telling us. Now, let me go over the adjusted scores again for fans and haters alike. So the adjusted scores focus more heavily on success rate versus EPA per play. In other words, down weighting some of the outlier plays, teams who were consistently successful. That's generally a stickier sort of stat over time than the actual EPA. Now, the components that go into that, the biggest things that are getting adjusted is number 1, turnovers. So there's a big advantage in one way or another in EPA per play for turnovers. That's going to have a huge difference, especially things like pick sixes and whatnot are going to have a huge difference. They're going to be down weighted in here. Late down success, so being able to convert those 3rd and 4th downs, because those are hugely impactful when it comes to the results of a game. I mean, the Packers, for instance, they convert a fourth down and get a 35-yard touchdown to Aaron Jones. I mean, that's just a massive, massive gain versus a play where they come away with no points about half of the time in that type of play. And then the last thing I look at are special teams and penalty advantage. The special teams, I'll tell you, is a little bit off now. The numbers are a bit off for NFL Faster's numbers. So it's not, I'm kind of missing some of the special team element. There wasn't a huge special teams plays. There were some missed field goals. Obviously, it was the Cowboys had a big run back of a blocked field goal last night. So it's more on the penalty side that I'm looking at these different games. But again, let's focus on games that have a big difference that, our perceptions might be a bit off from what actually happened in there. Okay, Commanders and Cardinals, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Sam Howell, one of the many rookies, maybe I'll just say negative 20 almost EPA when it came to interceptions, sacks, fumbles, all this sort of stuff. So yikes. 6 sacks for him. He was a sack taker in college too. So, Howell's one of the many things where if I was going to, stake a claim on what was going to happen this season, I was going to say these quarterbacks that we haven't seen anything from, especially mid-round to late-round quarterbacks, are probably not good. So we'll put that in the category of maybe we're getting a little evidence of being right on Sam Howell since, he's at home. He's facing Arizona Cardinals defense, which should be awful. But congratulations on the Cardinals for getting week 1 out of the way in their mission to tank here. You were able to do that successfully. Just awful numbers from Josh Dobbs, who I kind of feel bad for. He just showed up a couple days ago. But pretty much bottom 5th percentile type of efficiency for him this year. Okay, Panthers and Falcons. This is the first one where there's a pretty big difference. It's close to even in the adjusted score versus the 14-point differential. And the big differences are, they had basically equivalent success rates, the two different teams in this game. I mean, both bad at 38%, but basically equivalent success rates. The real big difference is the turnover advantage when it came to the Falcons. I mean, the Falcons were just kind of bad offensively. They're okay running. They had about a 60th percentile efficiency running the ball, but they were bad passing the ball. But they just didn't pass it that often, and they didn't have a ton of mistakes. I mean, Ritter took some sacks. He took 4 sacks, but no turnovers, which really helped. Bryce Young, on the other hand, 2 different interceptions, took some sacks, and wasn't particularly efficient throwing the ball. So a little bit of a rough start for Bryce Young. I think he needs to have a little bit more upside for what they're doing in the passing game to make up for some mistakes that he'll end up having. But, Ritter, while getting the win here, it really wasn't even a functional passing game. I mean, maybe the Falcons can get away with it. Arthur Smith probably loves this. They passed at about a 13% rate below expectation, even though they were winning. So they were way, way under expectation, even more so than they were last year. Ritter only had 24 total plays that he was a part of. I'm not sure if there's any rushes in there, but that might only be 24 dropbacks. So just, not good. His completion percentage over expected was actually pretty good, but just didn't generate any sort of value. 3.5 yards, his ADOT in this game. Again, it was not a functional passing game. There's a couple of catches in there for Kyle Pitts, but, big goose egg for Drake London on this one. And all the people over the offseason, I was getting a little tilted by everyone trying to point out Marcus Mariota's gone. Now how could Pitts and London have done well with Marcus Mariota? I mean, why do we think Desmond Ritter is going to be any better? He didn't show anything last year as far as his ability to actually generate anything. The Falcons, just refused to want to use their weapons, although they did use Bijan in the passing game, and we all saw that touchdown that they ended up scoring, although they used Algier on the goal line, which is probably frustrating for fantasy football managers for Bijan Robinson. But, Ritter barely functional in this one. So that's another one along with Howell is probably I'm putting in my category of betting against these inexperienced quarterbacks this year. Cleveland, Cincinnati. This one was actually fairly aligned with the real score. I mean, the adjusted score wasn't quite as big. It wasn't a 21-point difference. It's only a 14-point difference here. But the Bengals were just so bad. Their success rate at 21.4% offensively was actually so bad I had to adjust my scaling and the colors on that because it set a new low for success rate. I don't think we had a number that bad all of last season. I guess it was misty or rainy. It's weird that this time in September would have been such difficult conditions in Cleveland. And I think this is part of the Deshaun Watson story. He wasn't as bad as Burrow, but he hasn't been good. And the conditions in Cleveland when he played last year at the end of the season and then in his first game, just really, really bringing down results. But Burrow was by either the worst or the second worst quarterback of the week when it came to EPA per play, losing about half a point every single time he was involved in a play. His completion percentage versus expectation was about 20% lower than you would have thought. 7.1 yard ADOT, so not throwing the ball down the field very much. Just a really, really, really ugly game. And Watson was okay. He was a little bit he was a little bit positive with EPA per play, but that really all came from positives on scrambles and design runs, including a 13-yard touchdown run that he had. Straight up passing the ball, not so great from Watson again. So, I don't know where we want to sit on the freak out monitor for Watson so far. He's someone I expected to bounce back a little bit this year. Didn't really happen in week 1 in tough conditions, but the defense was just crushing, providing so much pressure. I don't have the advanced stats from PFF yet, but I'll include some of that in my analysis later on this week. Maybe I'll make note of the Bengals' fourth down decisioning. Yeah, they couldn't do anything offensively, so, passing up all 7 opportunities that they had, according to the numbers, to gain at least 1% win probability by going for it. They passed them all up. They went for it later, actually, when it was like desperation time and they didn't even have an advantage. But, maybe I'll cut them some slack on that. But they did punt from the 38-yard line from the Browns 38-yard line, which I think netted them a cool 18 yards. Come on, man. You can't be doing that, Zach. Not that it really mattered in this game. Maybe this is the kind of game you got to flush it and just move on. 8 targets for T. Higgins, 0 catches. Baltimore, Houston, ugly. What can I say? A little bit closer on the adjusted score than the actual score because both teams were just bad. Like the Ravens had a 38% success rate, the Texans at 32%, so they were much worse. But they were better converting on 3rd and 4th down. And the Texans, they converted 1 of 4 fourth downs that they had. They lost about 10 expected points on those. So the game would have been a little bit closer if they could have converted another one of those. Going forward, and I'm going to try to have to figure out how I'm going to put this into my power rankings. The Ravens are going to be a little bit concerned injury-wise. J.K. Dobbins sounds like he's done, torn Achilles. We'll get updates on Ronnie Stanley, Tyler Linderbaum, and Marcus Williams, their very expensive free agent signing from last offseason at safety, all left the game at some point. Ravens, the most interesting thing for me, Lamar Jackson, he had 2 designed runs in this game. That's it. So they're trying to make this into a legitimate passing offense. Now, he has some scrambles, and he generated some value there on scrambles, but only 2 designed runs. I mean, I don't know, man. I get it. He wants to be a passer. He doesn't want to get injured. They want to protect him. But when you're not playing the Texans, maybe got to use the most dynamic runner in the NFL as a runner and not just as a passer. I know Zay Flowers look pretty good. I know you got OBJ there. I know you got, healthy guys outside of Mark Andrews who wasn't there. Maybe that's like the key here for why Watson wasn't very good passing the ball. But I don't know. Got to run him here. Big mistakes, though, for Jackson is really what ended up holding him down. 2 different fumbles, lost 1, interception, 4 sacks. I don't know. Is the Houston Texans, are they decent? They might be. I mean, if CJ Stroud can get things turned around, the offense can get things turned around a little bit, maybe they can make some noise. It's a really, really bad division. So they need to pull things together, although I wasn't as high on Stroud as I was on Young and Richardson coming out of college. Speaking of Richardson, let's turn to the Colts-Jaguars here. Everything pretty much aligns between real score and adjusted score. The Jags had a 50% success rate. The Colts were only at 35%. Now, Richardson did end up having slightly positive EPA per play in this game, but it was, clunky at best. Lawrence had pretty negative EPA per play, but he was really victim of number one, a pass that went off of Tank Bigsby's hands. It was behind Bigsby, but it went off of his hands and then was intercepted. And then there was also a play where he was hit in his throwing motion. The ball flew forward. No one on the Jags seemed to pay attention to what was happening, and then they ended up punching it out. The Colts ended up punching it out and running it in for a touchdown. So, you know, Lawrence, I think, had a pretty good game. When I do my comparison of EPA per play and grading, he'll probably look much, 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 much better by grading than he did by EPA per play. Colts offense, maybe they need Jonathan Taylor after poo-pooing them needing Jonathan Taylor all offseason. 1.6 yards per carry for their running backs there. First percentile rushing efficiency for them. Not good at all for the Colts. Props to the Jags for a couple of fourth down decisions. They went for it both times that they had a good they had huge advantages to do so. Only 1 for 3 though on their fourth down, so they didn't gain a bunch of value. But props for him for taking advantage of that. Calvin Ridley, and when we contrast like the Calvin Ridley trade versus someone like the Kadarius Toney trade, man, this Calvin Ridley trade is looking good. I think he could get pumped up to what, like a second rounder or something like that, if he ends up playing extremely well, if they make the playoffs, all that sort of stuff. But 11 targets, 8 catches, 101 yards, and a touchdown for Ridley in this game. Good for the Jags just to log this. Okay performance from Richardson. He looked a lot better than he did in the preseason. Negative 5.5% completion percentage versus expectation, but that's fine. 5.8 ADOT, so a little bit of a lower passing game, but that was a good number, a good game for him generally. But again, best performance from the rookies amongst some not so great performances. Pittsburgh, San Francisco. I don't know. Can we just skip this? Well, this actually, it's a little bit closer, the adjusted score versus the 23-point differential on there. Third and fourth down, there was a lot of problems here for the Steelers. They just couldn't, they couldn't convert, and that really hurt them in this game. And the preseason magic for Kenny Pickett. Well, in my research, I found that how second-year quarterbacks do in the preseason doesn't really have any correlation to how well they play. So maybe we should have been fading that for Pickett a little bit the entire time. Brock Purdy, only 34 plays, so he wasn't involved a lot. Got a huge run from Christian McCaffrey, but about 0.27 EPA per play, one of the best numbers of the week, and that includes a -6 expected points on a strip sack. So if that didn't happen, that would have boosted him up quite a bit higher on the week. San Francisco is a little skeptical, although my numbers were not skeptical of San Francisco, but just subjectively, I was a little skeptical that they could keep things going with Brock Purdy. But, maybe, and as we'll see with Jimmy Garoppolo's success this week, maybe Shanahan, he's not just sprinkling magic dust on every single quarterback out there. Maybe Brock Purdy is actually good, and Trey Lance stinks, and Matt Ryan's good, and Jimmy Garoppolo is good. And who did he have before that? And Brian Hoyer stinks. And that's why he had different results. Shanahan had different results with different quarterbacks, and the coaches can only do so much with their quarterbacks. Minnesota, Tampa Bay. Congratulations, Vikings. You are the adjusted score winner of this game, despite losing this. Finally losing one-score games after being, I think it was undefeated in one-score games last year. Many times last year, I had them as being the worst team fundamentally by the adjusted score when they did win the game. The reverse happens here. I mean, it was pretty close. It's just the Vikings really got killed on the turnovers, and that's what ended up throwing them way, way down here. 2 fumbles lost and an interception to kind of offset the fact that there was 350 yards passing and a couple of touchdowns for Kirk Cousins. He still ended up with positive EPA on the day, but only barely so. He should have had much, much more when you consider he just generated a ton of EPA passing the ball. Those turnovers were absolute killers for them. The Bucs, I don't have a lot to say here. They basically did nothing for a quarter and a half. Mike Evans had a good touchdown. Baker Mayfield limited mistakes in this game, only took 1 sack and had 0 turnovers, and that's what enabled them to, scratch out a victory here, even though they were probably the worst team in this one here. Although I was high on the Bucs and low on the Vikings relative coming into the season, so I'll take the confirmation on that. New Orleans, Tennessee, not a lot to say on this one. Really bad success rate for the Titans. They ran the ball fairly well, just really, really bad passing the ball. Fourth down decision by Mike Vrabel. Maybe I'll highlight that. It was 4th and 6, 11 yards from the opponent's end zone with 2 minutes and 20 seconds to go. Not the biggest win probability loss, 3.1% they would have gained by going for it for that decision. So not a huge number, but it's one of those ones where it's so late in the game that you just open up the fact that you'll never get the ball back. And again, we're talking about possessions here versus points sometimes. When you're in a close game, you want to maximize your number of possessions by giving up that possession and kicking the field goal rather than getting the touchdown in that circumstance. You are opening up all these scenarios where you're only going to have that, that was it. You're not going to get 0 possessions the rest of the game, and that's what ended up really happening to this one. I think I want to highlight Derek Carr because he played pretty well in this game. Not that Tennessee has a great defense or anything like that, but 0.2 EPA per play, 10% over expectation is completion percentage. So he played well. It's just they couldn't run the ball at all for the Saints, and I think that was a problem. 11.5-yard ADOT for Carr. It's one of those ones where I think it was close. He had a really ugly-looking interception that a lot of people probably saw if they were watching Red Zone. So Carr's a guy who played a little bit better than you think, and I'm very high on the Saints this year. So they didn't look great on this one, but we'll take the W for the to end out the early window there. Okay, let's get to the late window, discuss some of these here. Again, Q&A, if you have any questions, go ahead and fire them in there. I'll get to them after going through the rest of the late window here. We'll start Chicago, Green Bay. So 18-point actual differential, 38-20, 7-point adjusted score. So I don't know. It's probably not much of a consolation for the Bears here since it was ugly, but it was a little bit closer than you might think. It was really the 3rd and 4th downs. Again, massive number, about 30 EPA difference when it came to how much you're gaining or losing on those 3rd and 4th downs. Jordan Love got the 35-yard touchdown to Aaron Jones on 4th and 3. They also converted a 3rd and 13, a 3rd and 10, 2 3rd and 8s, and a 3rd and 6. So this is something to keep in mind when we're looking at these Jordan Love efficiency numbers. Maybe he's just, out of his mind on 3rd downs generally and 4th downs generally, but, we might not expect that always going forward. Justin Fields. Now, this is the difference when it comes to on these late downs and what happens on downs where he has to pass the ball a lot of the times on this one. Pick 6 on 3rd and 11, obviously hugely negative. And they also failed to convert a 4th and 1. And then Fields was sacked twice on 3rd down with less than 5 yards to go. So all those different plays rolled together, highly inefficient on 3rd and 4th down for the for the Bears when they needed to move forward on those plays. Let me see here. Yeah, Jordan Love, you can't really argue too much with the performance here. Only 31 plays, so a little bit of a low sample for him. Little bit completion percentage under expected, about 5%, but again, I'm nitpicking here. Maybe the competition, the Bears, wasn't the greatest competition here, so that's part of it. But we'll put that in the box of successful performance for Jordan Love, and we'll wait and see. But it shouldn't be surprised that he was better than the other inexperienced quarterbacks who we hadn't seen because he was a 1st-round draft pick. He was not a 3rd-round pick like Ritter. He was not a 5th-round pick like Howell. Who's the other inexperienced guy that I was talking about last time? I gotta look it up. This is pausing. I wish I had a hold music on here while I look this up. Who was the other guy that I was going to mention? Pickett, maybe? Pickett, whatever. Late 1st-round pick too. So he should have been a little bit better than he was. Okay, let's look at. Oh, wait, one other thing here when it comes to Fields. Are they going to throw the ball down the field? Volume was okay. So I think number one, we'll say, hey, we got at least some signal and some positive here with the volume. Now, they were down a lot, so they kind of had to pass the ball. So maybe we shouldn't give Fields too much credit here. But still, 38 pass attempts, or 37 pass attempts. 9 more than he threw in any game last season. And they were losing a lot of games last season. So it wasn't like he was playing from ahead, and that makes a difference. So, hey, at least they're willing to let him throw the ball. But 8% completion percentage under expected, 3.1 yard ADOT. So big time training wheels. You got the training wheels on. You got, DJ Moore there now. You invested in that sort of weapon. Your ADOT, I mean, DJ Moore's not really a downfield. He's more of a yak sort of guy, but still, you got to push the ball a little bit more down the field. You cannot have training wheels on the passing game in your third NFL season. So I'm a little bit encouraged by the fact that he's at least passing, at least trying to pass the ball, but we got to do more. We got to give yourself at least a chance for some more upside for Justin Fields. Fields is another guy I was skeptical of, so maybe I'll self-congratulate on that slightly. Okay, Seahawks, Rams. I mean, Stafford's a story here. Again, I'm waiting for some of the advanced stats here. Actually, I should check to make sure they're not out at PFF right now, because I think they got basically like no pressure. Nope, still not out yet. No pressure on Stafford in this game. And, Stafford's issue has been like the offensive line's not there. You pressure him, he has a tendency to crumble a little bit there. But that wasn't the case. The Rams ran the ball pretty well, which they didn't do at all last year. Killed it passing the ball. Drop back EPA per play, 95th percentile. Just destroyed the Seahawks defense on that one. Wasn't a whole lot of fluky stuff, I would say, in this one. Adjusted scores a little bit closer because the Seahawks are just really, really bad on third down. And I don't think that's something that's consistent. 2 for 9 on late downs, whereas the Rams, 12 for 18 on third and fourth down, including a fourth down conversion. So that's probably a little bit unsustainable to, grind out and continue to convert on that high of a basis as the Rams did. But still, a lot of the power rankings, including my own, that have the Rams in the bottom 3 or 4 or 5 teams, going to need some adjustments going forward if Stafford's able to return to form like this. And they can keep him blocked up front. I don't know how much of this, and we'll find out in the coming weeks, is the Seattle defense being able to pressure and not being able to cover without Cooper Kupp out there. And we were talking about, God, what's the lightweight guys? Who's running out there? Who was running wide open? Why can't I remember his name? Tutu Atwell. Running wide open down the field at times. Probably need to sort that out. I mean, Stafford had a 10-yard ADOT, so he was throwing the ball down the field. 0 interceptions, 0 sacks, 0 fumbles. That's always a huge thing for Stafford and a big problem for him. Geno was okay. Slightly negative EPA per play, slightly negative CPOE, where he was one of the top guys in that category last year. 4.9 yard ADOT, so that's not so hot defensively. But not a lot of mistakes. That was kind of the thing that was really holding Geno down last year. I mean, he took some sacks, had -2 expected points on sacks, but that's not much. That's not that bad. It was more just the fundamentals of not being able to find guys open down the field for the Seahawks. So I was a skeptic of the Seahawks coming into the season, and so far, I'll put that also in the category of being proven right a little bit there. Okay, Denver, Las Vegas. I got to just talk Jimmy. I'm one of the world's biggest Jimmy truthers out there. So almost half a point EPA per play, which will put him in the top 3 or 4 guys this year. That's well above MVP type of numbers if it continued over the course of the season, which it won't. But pretty good. I mean, I don't know about the Broncos defense. We'll see how. You never know if they're going to fall off a cliff, but they were okay last year. And in Denver, people will see the interception in the end zone that he had, which was on third down. So that makes it not quite as costly as you might think, and say, oh, that's Jimmy doing Jimmy. But what they're not seeing as much is the dude just converts third downs. And this was always one of the things that I would dispute. One of the biggest pieces of evidence that I had to dispute this idea that, he was just a creation of the Shanahan system and the weapons that they had there. I mean, well, the weapons less so than the Shanahan system and the running game and all that sort of stuff is like, if it's all about the running game and it's all about play action, it's all about, his ability to work off of that, then why was he always so outstanding on third down, like converting third downs? Just the way he plays by quick reads, accurate throws, quick release, hitting guys on those slants. That's not really like a system thing. That's just him going out there and converting third downs. And that's kind of what he did in this one. I mean, there were 6 for 12 on third and fourth down, but some of these were a little bit longer ones, which really helped them continue to move the chains there. And they couldn't do anything running the ball. They're pretty bad. It was like a bottom 10th percentile type of performance running the ball for the Raiders. So it was really Jimmy that was moving that offense. And I know you look up and you say, well, they only had 17 points. How great could it have been? Well, again, they couldn't run the ball. So that was a big part of the problem. Jimmy was doing his thing when it came to passing. And he's also done pretty well when they didn't have weapons, even back in 2017 for the 49ers. His limited time with the Patriots, he's always been pretty good. So we'll see if truthers come around a little bit on, or the haters come around a little bit on Garoppolo, but truthers are taking this as a victory. Russell Wilson, I don't think he's fixed, but he did have positive EPA per play. They had a fairly decent success rate passing the ball, but 4-yard ADOT. And I think it was 4.6 net yards per pass attempt. Very, very high completion percentage over expected. I think it was the top one for Russell Wilson, 15% over expectation. Didn't take sacks, so we didn't have that problem. So they were grinding the way down the field, but just low upside passing game. And you're going to need, maybe that's part of the system when it comes to Sean Payton, similar to being with the Saints, but we'll see how that continues going forward. But big victory for the Raiders here, who, just weren't as successful offensively generally because they had a lot of problems running the ball, and they ran the ball a decent amount in this game. Okay, let's get to the highlight game, I would say, of the week, and that is Chargers-Dolphins. Chargers-Dolphins. What a performance for Tua and Tyreek Hill. We can't forget Tyreek Hill here. They passed at about 11% over expectations. So they're leaning into the pass. They couldn't run the ball. About a negative half a point every single time they ran the ball, although that might also include the muffed snap and fumble from Tua on that one. But in the 98th, 99th percentile passing the ball. This is a big contrast. I think if they would have lost this game, a lot of people would have maybe looked over the fact it was like, oh, Herbert wins, Tua loses. Herbert had a good game, Tua had a good game. Well, the Chargers were crushing it on the ground. 0.32 EPA per play, about 98th percentile, 234 yards rushing at about 6 yards per carry. Just big numbers for the Chargers on the ground, and that might have not been paid attention to as much as it should have been. Whereas the Chargers, who were typically a bad running defense, they actually held the Dolphins way down, and it was really just Tua and Tyreek and Jalen Waddle who were crushing it for this. Tua's probably your MVP of the week, highest EPA per play, and I'm adjusting out, though, at least a decent amount of that muffed snap, since we don't really know whose fault that was there. Not many negatives there. 11 ADOT throwing the ball down the field. And then Tyreek Hill, maybe he's the real MVP of the week. 15 targets, 35% share, 11 catches, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns. They were averaging almost a full point in EPA every single time they targeted him. So targeting Tyreek Hill 15 times gets you 15 more points than expected. Massive numbers. Now, Tyreek Hill was my, non-quarterback offensive MVP last year. I said he should have been offensive player of the year. He only trailed Jefferson because he wasn't out on the field as much. He's not 100% route running type of player like Jefferson was, but he's so much better efficiency wise. And it just really came through today. I mean, the dude is just incredibly awesome. Herbert was okay. He wasn't bad in this game, but I think what you have to look at for him is to say, maybe you send Joe Lombardi packing and it doesn't fix everything as far as throwing the ball down the field. Maybe you need to get some guys who can get open down the field. Tua's ADOT went from jumped by multiple yards once he had Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill to throw down the field. Josh Hermsmeyer, friend of the pod, he commonly says that ADOT belongs to the receiver, not the quarterback. I mean, it's a mix, of course. It's a simplification, just like, running backs don't matter as a simplification, but it's mostly true. You got to be able to get open down the field. And when Mike Williams gets injured, for the 15th time, and they bring in Quentin Johnston, and, he actually ran like a 4.5 something. He's not like a burner down the field. He's more of a yak guy, maybe in some ways. You got Keenan Allen out there. You got Austin Eckler, who you're throwing the ball a lot to. Just not a lot of downfield options, really. Whereas Tua is just generating a ton of air yards EPA, and not just yak, just a ton of air yards, and just not the case at all for Herbert. 7.2 A dot, not the worst A dot, but not much higher, if not roughly equivalent to what he was at last year when everyone was saying Joe Lombardi's the problem, Joe Lombardi's the problem, Joe Lombardi's the problem. Well, you got to have a quarterback who wants to push the ball down the field. And to even a greater degree, you got to have receivers who can get open down the field to motivate the quarterback to do that. It's not just you draw it up on a piece of paper and you say, throw down, long, throw long. And all of a sudden your offense is fixed. Sometimes these guys like Lombardi, who've been coaching for a couple of decades, know a little bit more than, the Twitter, than your Twitter OCs out here who draw up a couple of plays and say, boom, boom, boom. Hey, we just fixed the Chargers. We throw it down the field all the time. Okay, I'm being a little negative there, but you get my point. Okay, Patriots, Eagles, ugly game. I mean, probably the right result, although I don't know, man. The Eagles offense, this was 36.4% offensive success rate, which is the worst number for the Eagles have had since 2021. So it was a lower success rate for the Eagles in this game than any game that Jalen Hurts started last season. Maybe they got a little bit bored with an early lead, but, it got kind of close there. If the Patriots were able to convert some third downs, if Boutte, is that his name? Boutte, the kid from LSU, if he can get that second foot down and they can convert some third downs, maybe they'd be okay. I mean, Mac Jones wasn't awful, but he had negative EPA. Jalen Hurts, negative EPA. 70-yard pick six for the Eagles, which went off of a receiver's hands, but was a bad throw by Mac Jones. Cost him about 10 expected points on that play. So without that, he would have had positive EPA on the game, but you can't just take out the most impactful play every single week. It's a problem that Mac Jones has become this kind of like low upside quarterback who also had a bunch of mistakes last year. And then the mistakes continued, at least to some degree so far this year. Maybe this Patriots defense will be able to hold them in a bunch of games, keeping the Eagles down here, but it might have been more about the conditions there in Foxborough than it was about the fundamentals of this game. Eagles hoping to, flush the results offensively here, move on to next week, but their schedule is going to be much, much harder this year. So they're going to have more tests when it comes to getting out on the field. Their defense is going to be tested more, and their offense is going to be tested more this year. So far, the first test, I guess you could say they passed, but they passed maybe with a C minus. C minus type of passing grade, as opposed to passing with an A or B grade like they were consistently last season. Sunday Night Football. Do I need to talk about this? I mean, 40-0. On the positive side, only a 20-point differential according to my adjusted scores. Second percentile offensive game for the Giants. Daniel Jones, 51 plays, losing an average of half a point in EPA per play. Ugh, just yikes. I mean, too early to close the book on him and the rest of the offense. I was hoping with some playmakers down the field they could do something a bit more, but they got to get him protected. Again, once we get these numbers in here from PFF, we'll have some more ideas of exactly what the pressure was, but it was ugly. I didn't really watch the second half, so I can't comment that much on that. Dak, he was fine. Low CPOE, but some big plays. Boosted his EPA per play up to 0.34, which is one of the highest numbers of the week, but only 28 plays. Didn't have to do a whole lot in this game. All right. Doesn't look like there's much. Oh, it was one Q&A here. And if there's any more Q&A, go ahead and fire that over to me. Otherwise, I'm going to hop off. I'll come back at you tomorrow if we get something interesting on Monday Night Football. Maybe going to continue to do around the same time. 10 a.m. if you're on YouTube here. So, okay, anyway, so let me bring up this a big one here. So it's going to cover my head on YouTube, but we're going to do it anyway. One Man's Odyssey Q&A here says, as a Bears fan, I'm tilting hard. Not that I expected that much. This game has me reconsidering the entire polls regime. Can you talk me down from the ledge? I know first game, etc. I don't know if I could talk you down from the ledge. I mean, here's the problem. No matter what you do, it's like the analogy they say is rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? Like Fields was so bad passing the ball. I don't think people like quite consider how bad he was. And they didn't even attempt to pass the ball last year. I know he didn't have anyone around him. I know he didn't have receivers. I know it was no offensive line, all that sort of stuff. But when you're that bad, it doesn't really like matter. You don't have any synergy if you're adding pieces to this offense. Now, he had some good throws. I think he caught Mooney in the end zone, who was pretty wide open, honestly. But if he can sit and fire and throw, he looks pretty good. The problem is you have to have a very, very, very high level offense and scheme and offensive line, something that you maybe can't build over, basically one offseason. I mean, the Bears were handicapped when Poles came in with a just god awful cap situation left by the previous regime that they couldn't even really rebuild until this offseason. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to, like be perfect almost on a lot of these other picks in order to build around Fields if he cannot pass in non-ideal situations and circumstances. If he can't just, look and throw to the guy who's open. You're going to have to be really, really good. And that's why I advocated they should look, at a quarterback. And, if it was Bryce Young, if it was Anthony Richardson, if it was somebody, you just got to get that right. Because if you get that right, it just makes building the rest of your team so much easier. So I don't really care how much draft capital you have around that. Well, what else do you say? There's more here. It says, why wait to build in the trenches? Why be so silent in free agency besides having so much money? I mean, I'm not really against him for that sort of stuff. I think you don't want to just, blow everything up in free agency and overpay, which is generally what you're doing there. But again, they had a really bad time on 3rd and 4th down, so we'll wait and see a bit. That's going to be the key, is to say, against a little bit lesser competition, maybe defensively. A few more breaks on 3rd and 4th down. You get some big runs from Fields where basically if you don't have those big runs, the offense grinds to a halt. So I don't know. I just think the big thing is like you don't get the quarterback right, it doesn't matter. So that's the one thing that I would point to as being at least through 1 week, we could say, maybe it's not going to matter how many of those draft picks and what you're going to build around this quarterback if you don't have the right guy. But then again, if they're bad enough this year and they can get up in there in the loss rankings and get a quarterback, who knows what will end up happening. Here's an interesting man from BC. Seahawks lost both tackles in the second half of the game. If they're long-term injuries, would that just sink the entire season? How many teams could survive losing both tackles? Well, it's all about your replacement level talent there. I think it could be problematic, but I do think Geno is actually pretty good at getting the ball out early if he needs to. I mean, he does take a lot of sacks, so maybe that's a little bit of an issue. They do like to throw the ball down the field, so maybe that's a bit of an issue. So I don't know. It's one of those things where you could say it all depends. It all depends. But it is like a clustering type of injury, and it is a weak link system when we talk about the offensive line. So having 2 weak links, if it ends up being the case, or even 1 weak link versus what you had before, is going to be a pretty impactful loss there. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Soak it in, even though it wasn't a lot of goodness offensively for week 1. Again, check out the Substack. Hit me up if you need a comped sub there. Reply to the emails. Just sign up for free and then reply to the emails on me there. Otherwise, I'll be talking at everyone, I guess, tomorrow morning, and then I'll come back at you on Friday morning to talk about the Thursday night game. All right, everybody. Thanks, and take it easy.